Hello there. Welcome to the Maker Manager Money podcast, which inspires entrepreneurs to keep going and entrepreneurs to just start. My name is Kyle Knowles, and today's guest is Jennifer Tsay. Jennifer is the co-founder and CEO of Shoott, a company that offers free mini photo sessions with professional photographers, where clients only pay for the photos they love. With a diverse background spanning investment banking, strategic finance, documentary film production, and acting, Jennifer brings a unique blend of process-oriented thinking and artistic passion to her leadership at Shoott. Recognized as a Forbes Next 1000 entrepreneur and one of Brit & Co.'s 30 AAPI founders we love to support, Jennifer is on a mission to revolutionize the freelance creative space and democratize access to professional portrait photography. Shoott operates in over 60 U.S. cities with a network of 750 plus photographers. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me.
Where are you dialing in from today?
I am dialing in from New Jersey, right outside New York City.
You know, when I look at your LinkedIn profile and all the experience you've had before you became an entrepreneur, I guess my first question is, were there any jobs in the past that were your favorite? I know you worked for American Express, you worked for Citibank, you did all kinds of different things from operations to finance to also being a producer of documentary films and an actor. What was your favorite job before becoming an entrepreneur?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. I will tell you what, my favorite jobs were none of the corporate jobs, because they were very exciting to get and they gave a lot of stability, but they became super boring because they're so rote. So I would say the things that I enjoyed the most before were jobs where I had to like figure things out on the fly, and every decision I made mattered. So I helped produce a documentary, that was the very first time I was doing it, but like everything that I was doing for it was super important, whether it was booking guests or figuring out locations or figuring out budget, just figuring out how to make that documentary happen. All of that was such a labor of love. And I realized I really liked working in that way.
And what was the documentary film that you were working on?
Yeah, it's called Divided Families, and it's about Korea's families that were divided on the North and South Hemisphere. So when the Korean War happened, a lot of people's families were split up and people were still trapped in the North, and people just haven't seen their siblings, parents, whatever, in like 50 plus years, and some of those people are dying off. So it was important to have a documentary to try to, at the time, get legislation to spur some of the meetings where the North and South could get families to see each other again.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
How did you get involved with it? Was it from your acting experience or?
That was actually before I started acting. So I think I just met the producers. I forget exactly how I got involved, but I was like in my 20s and people were like, oh, they need help and volunteers, I think for their fundraiser. They were trying to fundraise for the shoot to begin with. And once I got involved, I was like, oh, hey, I can help you run your auction. I can help MC your auction. I can help you procure goods for it. Like all of those types of activities, again, similar to, it's a very entrepreneurial thing. And then I got brought on as a producer because I could kind of do things on the fly.
I think a lot of people are confused about a producer's role because sometimes people think that they just donate money or they contribute money and then they get a producer credit. But a lot of the producers are doing a lot of the behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And there's all different types of producers. So I think if you're in a more traditional role at like a movie, like a line producer, I think just does like some of the financial stuff. But like, because it was such a small operation, we were doing literally everything possible. So it was such a hybrid role of being like, like a production assistant, to like planning things, paying for things, managing budget, all of that.
That's really cool. So talk to me about your acting experience as well before you became an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So it was something that I did briefly in college. And while I was doing corporate work, I was like, I don't think that this is like it for my life. So let me just like actually scratch that itch in terms of like all the things I want to try. So at that time, it was around the time that, I was producing the documentary where I was like, let me also take writing classes, dance classes, acting classes. Let me really kind of explore what it means to be an artist. And so I took acting classes and then I went to an acting conservatory. I decided to really pursue that for 2 years. And then it was when you are trying to be an actor in New York or anywhere really, but definitely in New York, it's like you are your own entrepreneur for that too. You're your own product. So it's a lot of hustling. It's a lot of making sure that you're going to all the auditions that you can, you're meeting the right people, you're following up with the right industry people, you're taking the right classes. It's just like this constant hustle of like running around the city and doing things, which I actually really enjoyed doing. I love doing the work. It was a fun lifestyle. It definitely, I still act sometimes, but it definitely died down during the pandemic for obvious reasons. And it hasn't quite exactly recovered since then. But, I think during that time of me being an actor, I learned so much about how to how to work in environments where everyone's different all the time. And I mean to say, like, people are really different within a team. And also, you were in one production, then you go to a totally different production, it's totally different people. So you just have to constantly be good at reading people, adjusting to people, all of that stuff. And also, it's a very sensitive environment. So, like, I also learned how to give notes to people in those environments, if that makes sense.
For sure. And then, so do you still go on some casting calls and things like that?
I do if something is like a really good fit. I might make time for it, but I think since Shoot has really taken off, I feel really responsible that I provide a supplemental source of income for at least 750 people as well as my own team. So I do prioritize that now.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, it's such a diverse, I guess, road. It's a windy road for you to end up as an entrepreneur, and
Mhm.
you had lots of experience before that. So, what was the aha moment for you when you said, "I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm going to leave corporate"?
Mhm.
And at this point, you had tried the acting thing, you had produced a documentary film, but what was it that made you go, "No, I'm going to go give this a shot"?
I think I was project managing somewhere, and that was my day job while I was still doing a little bit of acting, on the side. And I was in an environment that was very corporate where I just knew that everyone had kind of the mindset that people don't really change. So you can't ask much of people. And I was like, I don't believe in that. I believe very much in a growth mindset. And so I kind of want to go in another I just want to be in a different place. And what I did was I reached out to an old mentor of mine that was he's a serial entrepreneur that I worked for as one of my day jobs while I was acting. But I worked for him before, but then he moved over to Paris and raised his kids there. So the operation I worked for with him, it kind of shuttered. So I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, I'm interested. I think like the startup environment is where my skills are best utilized. If you wouldn't mind being, a reference for me, that would be great. And also, if you know of any startups that are hiring, please let me know." And he wrote back, I think, and keep in mind, I haven't spoken to him in like a decade. And then he wrote back to me, I would say in like 20 minutes, something crazy on email, and was like, "Hey, this is so weird. I'm in New York and I actually like want to do a new startup. Like, when can you meet so we can chat?" He's like, "I totally forgot about, you and your skill set and all that fun stuff." Because he is traditionally like the big ideas guy. And I was very much I can execute stuff. So we got together, and within 2 days, when we were talking about where I'd been and the challenges that I'd seen and what it means to be an artist and the struggles of ours, we after those conversations came up the concept for Shoot, which was originally really meant to help address like the gig economy challenges that professional photographers face.
That's really cool. And then, so how did you come up with the name Shoot? I mean, it makes sense, right? With
Yeah. And just so like, it's Shoot with two T's. I think it's
correct.
important to say that, right? And so I think I think Dan just looked at it and was like, "Hey, I think let's just add another T." And I remember, and you know what? I have to say, I'm glad he said that, because had it just been one T, and we had gotten this feedback like really early, is that it can just with everything with like gun control, it doesn't necessarily immediately connote photo shoot when you shorten it like that. So we're glad that extra T is there now.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
Yeah,
So, don't let the wrong traffic come to your website.
absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
cool. So talk about, because it makes sense because of the gig economy, and I don't know if this is a good analogy or not, but you're kind of the Uber for photographers in a way.
Mhm.
Was that the concept?
Yeah, that's a really good parallel. So we are a marketplace platform, and what we do is we vet and screen hundreds and thousands of photographers. We only hire the top 2 to 5% that apply. And when you normally hire a photographer, it can be this really cumbersome process. You have to crowdsource for the recommendations, or you're Googling, and then you have to, everyone has different pricing, whatever. And so we kind of do all of that legwork. We have a really rigorous process to screen the photographers to make sure that they deliver quality and have great personalities. We put them on our platform. We take their supplemental availability and basically put that on our website. So if some say we take one photographer and we're like, what's your availability? He's available on Saturday. Great. We'll put you at Central Park in this one corner. So all the clients will put your availability up. People can book you back to back, and we will see if that works. So you compare and contrast with what it is normally. People book a photographer, but a photographer has to cobble together a bunch of different, completely disparate bookings. So they maybe have a booking on Tuesday, have one on Friday, have to drive a lot. It's just very not consolidated. So what we're doing is really consolidating all the demand to one place, and then passing along that benefit to the client in the form of a free photo shoot where clients only pay for the photos they want, because otherwise that would not be possible.
Yeah, because they would have to pay for them to show up or
Yes.
yeah. So and the way, checking out your website and everything, it looks like maybe a photographer is in a location for a period of time, and you're saying that multiple potential clients, customers would come to that location at different times, and they're already set up in that location to shoot.
Yes. So the photographer's stationed there. He knows there's a meeting point, and then all of our sessions are half hour. So people just book different half-hour slots. And it's such an easy way for them to get more volume and meet more clients. We basically take care of all of the business activities they have. So marketing, sales, customer service. We do all the platform things for them and scheduling. And so the only thing they have to do is show up and do what they love doing, which is photographing.
And how does one become a photographer with Shoot?
So the first thing is to apply. If you go to shoottwith2ts.com/careers, and I think then it's like join us, but you can see there that we look what we're looking for. So we have equipment requirements. So the cameras have to be professional grade. The megapixels that
Yeah.
the are able to generate, which is important because if people ever want to like blow up or enlarge their photos, we need to make sure it retains quality. So we have really high standards for our cameras and lenses. And then they also submit a portfolio. So we look at all of the different portfolios, we look at their portfolio, and then if the portfolio and the equipment makes sense and they're in cities that we need photographers, we then go to the next phase, which is an interview. So we do a video interview and video screening to screen for technical skills, and a nice personality. Thing is, like, photography is such a vulnerable thing. We need to make sure that people are actually warm and engaging and make people feel seen. So that's super important. If they pass that phase, then they go on to a test shoot. They figure out how to do a 10-minute test shoot to see if they can kind of shoot in our style, so that means, like, can they generate the variety, the image quality, all of that stuff. Like, it's kind of like can you function and function well in a short amount of time and produce really good quality. That's the test we put them through. They send us their test shoot. It comes back to us. And if they pass that, then they have a quiz with us, they onboard with us, and then they join our team. So it's a multi-step process they have to go through.
And that way clients know that you've
Oh,
vetted
yes.
them and they're going to get quality when they go to the shoot.
Yes, we also background check them, which is important because there's a lot of kids being photographed, so we just want to make sure that everyone is above board. That's all.
And was your co-founder a photographer or a businessman or?
Yeah, so I really have two co-founders. So there's Dan that I was speaking about before. That was my mentor that helped start it in the very beginning with me, and he is a serial entrepreneur himself, but now he's mostly an investor. So he's very much like the chairman, our advisor. And he helps also like procure funding for us, things like that when we want to do that. And then my other co-founder is Jennifer Tsay, and she is somebody that I knew in college. We went to the same university our freshman year, and we became best friends like immediately, and we did everything together. So there was always this knowledge and this like deep desire that we would work together as adults. Like we just hoped, but you kind of don't think it's possible, but it's something that you really are like, you wish really hard for it. And so when we were hitting places and early on when our team was like super small, and I'm like, oh my God, the only person that I feel like that I could do this with is Jen. But like, she's a single mom of three. She's really busy. I don't know if she'd ever do this with me. And I asked her, and when we were finally able to offer health insurance, she was like, I'm in. So we were like, okay, great. And so she's the real day to day. She rides the tandem bike with me, is what I call how we do leadership, and how we run Shoot.
Are you on more of the creative side, on more of the operational side, or what is your role?
Yeah, great question. So I am much more on the overall strategy and brand side, and then I do like the projections and things like that. She is much more like, if I'm like, hey, we need to figure out how to track this or do this email campaign, or these are the things that I think need to be put in place. She is the how person. You can give any problem to her and she will figure out a new platform or a methodology to do something so fast. So like, she can do what I can't do and I can do what she can't do. So we're a really, really nice balance.
So how many years after you had initially met her did you guys reconnect and start working together at Shoot?
I think it was literally 20 full years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Which is really, I know. I mean, it was just, and when you're out of touch for so long, and I hadn't talked to her for the first like 10 years of that, because like our lives just really diverged. Like I worked in New York and she became a mom really early and was really consumed with that. So our lives were super different. But then she got a divorce and was trying to figure out how to like get back on our feet and everything. We reconnected, and it's really fun to see that you guys are still kind of the same people 20 years later, but now you also have more skills and more life skills like amassed, and so it's really great to apply that to entrepreneurship.
And so, speaking of entrepreneurship, then I wanted to ask you, you were in these corporate roles, but I bet even in these corporate roles, you were entrepreneurial in a way, or trying to be. Maybe you felt like you were in a lane, but what are some examples of ways that you were entrepreneurial in your corporate roles?
I honestly don't know if I was,
Mm.
because I am a very like rules oriented person. So I feel like if they told me that something was my job and I didn't have a lot of sense of context outside of that, I kind of just did my job. And I think the part that is entrepreneurial is my like dissatisfaction with that lifestyle. Like it was never enough for me to just be, they're like, hey, this is how you succeed. And I'm like, all right. And I would just do that. And I'm like, this is okay, but like, I'm not interested in this. And so I think the part of me that is entrepreneurial is like, I think I find myself more in jobs that allow me that flexibility to try things and really improve things. So like when I worked for my co-founder Dan, like 15 years ago, originally, he was running a startup, and I was doing like different business development for him for the startups that he had, and I was like, oh, this is fun. He was like, can you write all the text for the website? I'm like, sure. He was like, can you do sales calls? I'm like, sure. So in those opportunities where there was a chance for me to really kind of like flex my muscles to do really different things and contribute that way, that's where I found my joy. And I think that's where it was entrepreneurial. But in a corporate role, it's hard because they tell you to do something, you just have to do what they tell you.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest difference between corporate and a startup.
Hmm.
A startup is more like a theater troupe, right?
Hmm.
One day you're, the star of the show and you're singing and you're out front, and then the next day you're, I don't know, pulling the curtains or something like that. So, but at corporate, everyone has a defined role, and it's like, stay in your lane. We've got everyone else in these other lanes. It's already filled. We don't need you to do anything else except your specific job.
One of the things I've always been very keen on is like really trying different things. So like if I'm curious about it, except drugs, I don't want to do this with drugs, but like with like activities and like knowledge and like jobs, I'm like really, I'm like, what is it like if I do this? What is it like if I try this? Does this work? Does this not? I feel like there you really see me like being like, who am I actually through what I do?
And did your acting classes and doing some acting translate into becoming a co-founder and leading a company?
That's a great question. I think, there's so much that you learn in acting that is just not linear. And if when you only do corporate, you're kind of taught that like there's a right answer to everything. And I think when you go into acting, you live in the gray area, but you also like you also acknowledge a lot of things that aren't acknowledged in like the corporate environment, if that makes sense. So like it's everything dealing with emotions, with impulses, with how people think and how they function. Like people have their own system too. If people didn't have a system they worked by that we could all recognize, we wouldn't be able to have story. We wouldn't be able to have TV. Like we know people as characters, right? And we know them in a narrative sense. And it's often stuff that's not written down on paper and it's not as linear, but we all kind of know it, even though we may have different relationships with ships with it and we may have a different language for it. And I think like having that flexibility to really grow in that area and see kind of different possibilities in that area kind of unlocks a different thing in your brain. And I feel like that really helps when you're going to entrepreneurship because your job is to figure out how to solve completely new problems in a way and be able to like consistently keep doing that without giving up. And in order to do that, the more that you're exposed to, the easier it is to do that because you're pulling inspiration from so many things on how to solve a problem. And I do think I got so much out of acting, whether it was like learning the voice of different playwrights, learning how to work with other people, learning how to trust other people, learning if it was a person I couldn't trust. That's actually super important in entrepreneurship too, right? Because I think like you can actually, I think I always like to say you can always mind fuck yourself into like doing the wrong thing. So you can sit there and say like, oh, you should give everyone a chance. Like you should assume the best in people. But if someone's actually giving you a lot of data that you can't trust them, you should also follow that. So there's like things like that go into so much about being an entrepreneur is also about wisdom and your own particular brand of wisdom and being able to like come to wise conclusions faster to on behalf of your company to move it forward. Does that make sense?
It does. Would it be trusting your instincts, and that's kind of
Yes.
comes from acting and creativity?
Yeah, I think like one of the so it's funny. I actually really hate when people say like, "Oh my god, you have to trust your gut." Only because I actually think the more important thing is before that is that you have to develop your gut. You have to know what your gut is because everyone's gut is different and your gut may tell like and all of our gut is like unique. So guts are unique, meaning like I am going to be really good at telling certain things and also be really blind at other things. So once you know that about yourself, you can kind of like build around that. So like if someone's really bad at like so like for example, I'm really bad at knowing when to fire people. Like so it's things like that. I will always want to give people like nonstop chances and I'll like I was saying I will trick myself into being like, no, like it's me, I can do more and whatever. This is a little bit like dating. So but I have other people on my team that are much better at that. So I'm like, and then I'll always go to them and be like, hey, my gut says this, but I know my gut is always wrong with this. I know it. So what is your read on it? And then I'm more likely to trust their gut on it because I know that they have like a 10 out of 10 in terms of judgment call there, where my judgment call is like 1 out of 10. So I think like when you can I really identify like how your gut works and then build around that and fortify where you're weak with other people who have strengths there, I think that then you know how to follow your gut, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I assume you might have learned some of these things from corporate life, but did you learn a lot of this from acting and pursuing creativity?
I think I did. I definitely think I did because I think especially in creative pursuits in creative industries, people show more of their personality. I think there's more of a burden to be super professional in a corporate environment, and then you kind of don't and it's not as pressure filled. Whereas a lot of creative arts are like, you have a show that you have to put on. It's still not great. Like everyone's stressed out. You're under budget, blah, blah, blah. Same type of thing in a startup. So when people get stressed out in a startup, how do they respond? They're going to respond more similarly to like a creative field than they are to a corporate field because there's a lot of like, you know, cushion in a corporate environment that helps them behave more professionally. So, and when it's a high stress environment, which is always startup, like people get super emotional and get really irrational.
It's funny. There's this guy on TikTok that does all these videos of, warning people in the corporate world, don't be your authentic self. Do you know what I mean? Whatever you do not be authentically you, because that's not what corporate wants from you. You
Absolutely. I
believe
actually agree with that.
you agree with that? I do too.
I do. I
I
do.
think it's really interesting because a startup is back to my analogy of like a theater troupe, but it's also like this. Uh, I don't know, corporations, and it's a sure sign that the corporation is maybe mafia style, is when they say, come join our family. But a
Yeah.
startup is more like the messiness of a family, and that fakeness in corporate, where everyone's like, this is such a great company, everyone's got to smile and do what is required no matter what, even if it doesn't make sense. Is so different than startups, where people can express opinions, and whether the leadership like listen to them or do them, it's just easier to kind of be maybe your more authentic self in a startup.
Absolutely. Because I think we work at a speed where it's not helpful to be opaque. I
Mhm.
think being opaque and being professional is it's just the way corporate is. And it moves so much slower anyway. I would say like the pace of a startup, working at a startup. Like I remember when I worked corporate, it was like you had a quote 8-hour workday, but you could take all day like doing something very slowly and then go to coffee and then go to meetings, and just like the productivity is not really there. At least I've never had a situation like that, except for investment banking, but that's a different animal altogether. That's a different animal. But it's there is like any sort of environment where there's HR, that's when you start having that sort of professional sheen on it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like theater, like film and TV, that kind of stuff doesn't have an HR. Sometimes it's not great, as we know, but like sometimes it's helpful to have it anyway. Anything without an HR, you're going to have much more, transparent behavior.
Maybe you can explain to me the key differences between someone who works in corporate, we've talked about some of them, and someone who works in a startup.
Yes. So I think corporate is really great for people who need stability in their lives. So like I would like personally, like for example, if I had a young child, like a super young one that needed a lot of attention, I would never recommend that person work in a startup. I think like corporate is so great if you want if you're someone who likes structure, and you know what to expect, and you know what is being asked of you, and you know how to deliver, and it's just a predictable sort of environment. I think that's great for a lot of people, depending on their life stage, right? And I've been saying a lot of things about how I don't like corporate, but it's much more of a fit issue. But often corporate's great because like the benefits are better. There's just more runway to making, like you could make a mistake, and there's training programs. There's just so many more resources to help you develop. And I think if you're a little more laid back, corporate's great for you too. I am not laid back when it comes to work. I love working super fast. So to me, startup is really about like throwing things against the wall and seeing if it sticks. I know it's such a cliche phrase when it comes to startup, but it's true. And you have to kind of enjoy that. It's kind of like, it's like if you enjoy escape rooms, like it's like, right, like in escape room, there's a certain time limit, and then you're trying to like figure it out, and you're with people and you're arguing and all that fun stuff. But some people really love that. Some people really love the problem solving. I also think, yeah, it's helpful if you're in a place where you really want to be career focused. Like I'm developing my career, I'm developing my skills. It's great if you want to learn on the fly, because the thing is that our in a startup the resources are so much more limited. So you have the chance to, like in corporate, I think you have to build up a resume in order to justify you being somewhere. But in a startup, it's someone can be like, I've never written blogs before. Can I try? And someone's like, yes, please. So there, and the more that you try, the faster you grow. So I think for people who want to kind of supercharge growth, for people who like change, who people like solving problems and executing things, like startup is a great environment for that.
Those are great answers. I love it. So I'm assuming because I saw a couple of things on the Shoott website
Mm.
that you're using AI tools.
Yes.
Okay. And so what specific AI tools and workflows have you adopted just personally as the leader of a startup?
Yeah. So I use ChatGPT quite a bit for like it's easy for me to write, but sometimes if I have to write blogs myself or LinkedIn articles, or if I'm like, I want to explain this thing, I only know how to say it in a long form, cumbersome way, I'll just put it in ChatGPT and oftentimes it is better. I'm like, okay, great. It's helped really change my workflow that way. I think, what other AI do we use? Sometimes when we are looking at photos, we love, what is it? Is a Photoshop, I think, where you can generatively fill part of that photo. So like if there's like a family in front of a tree and we just want to expand it out so that the sky is bigger or the tree is bigger, like it can do that. It can fill in gaps. So there's certain photo editing things where we've used AI, whereas like before, it would take us so long to Photoshop certain photos. It would take somebody like 4 hours that was really good at it. So that's like really supercharged some of our workflows there. What other AI do we use? We offer AI as AI editing for some of our photographers if they're in a time crunch, because we're always trying to be like, how can we make the workflow more efficient for them? So we do that. I'm sure there's other AI. We're constantly shopping around for different AI platforms.
Was there anything that you've done with AI that just blew your mind?
I think it blows your mind the first time you use it. Like for any of the any like kind of, whether you're using it to write or you're doing it on images, because it is so much faster. And it is sometimes better than what a person can do. And one of my favorite things to also outsource, like if we're busy and like one of my employees is having and like some sort of developmental issue, I'm like, I don't know how to like whatever. I'll be like, ask ChatGPT. I don't have time to like coach you on this, but ask ChatGPT, see if that helps you find a path forward. So like in certain areas of teaching and mentorship, it actually picks up really well. So that's kind of like a really nice supplement to have. And especially like if someone, I'm like, hey, if you have impulse control issues in a meeting, ask ChatGPT what you should do, what the like game plan for you is, and then like and then oh, we've been using AI. I forgot about this. We've just recently started using AI note takers. So before we would rely on our memory and whatever, and then we realized that our there's at least one or two of them that are really really good. So they like synthesize the notes from the entire meeting, and then they also score you. So they tell you whether you're talking too fast, you're talking too slow. I think they rate you on things like charisma, who you connected with most, because they can see where you're looking, things like that. And one of my employees today was like, I have really low charisma according to my note taker. I'm like, ask ChatGPT how to fix that. I don't know how to fix that for you. So like, it's stuff like that. It gets really comical. And it's nice because, when you ask ChatGPT, you can't get offended at that. So they're like, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, yeah. And so do you know what it is? Is it Reader?
It's Read AI. Yes. There's a whole bunch of them. There's like Firefly, and then I think I was trying Sauna for a little bit, but we've really liked Read AI.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, but it is kind of one of those look in the mirror too closely. Sometimes it's a little too high definition on the way
Yeah.
it critiques you, but yeah, that's really cool. And so using it as kind of a learning partner or then as a personal assistant and things like that.
Hmm.
That's really cool. Another question I have for you is what TV, movie, book, a musical or opera character do you most relate to?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Any fictional, you should give it to me this ahead of time. I probably would have asked my husband too. Because sometimes we laugh and we say that he's Groot and I'm Rocket the Raccoon, but I feel like, it's really not what you're looking for. Um, oh gosh, who do I most identify with? I'll just say this because it's just very fresh on my mind. Is that White Lotus season 3? I really love. Is her name Lori? have you
Yeah.
watched White
Oh, yeah.
Lotus
So
season 3?
the 3 women that are hanging out together? So
Yeah, and the blonde the blonde one who says, "I'm just happy to be here."
be at the table, yeah.
Yeah, be at the table or whatever. I'm just like, and I feel like, especially, I was like, oh, I identify with her so much and her struggle to be like, she's made some decisions that maybe hasn't been happy about. She does feel left out. She's trying to figure out her joy and all that fun stuff. I'm like, oh, I love that struggle. I know exactly what that feels like. I don't know if like other people looking at me would be like, oh yeah, that's you. But I was watching it and I'm like, oh, they portrayed that so beautifully. And I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, the writing is so amazing. That monologue was
Yeah.
one of the best scenes in the whole thing, and just
Yes.
her character development and journey, it kind
Mhm.
of carried the other 2 women as well, so
Yeah.
that's a really good answer. So, what's one thing you'd like to change about yourself?
That's a great question. I feel like I have not been asked this in a very long time. Um, I think that something that it's so funny. I feel like everyone has kind of like their Shakespearean, what is that called? What is that called when you have, oh, your tragic flaw.
Okay.
And I feel like when people have kind of the tragic flaw and they're not super aware of it, and or they haven't figured out how to heal that, they almost kind of drive their life to make that tragic flaw come true. So like there's for example, there's people that I know that all they want to do is be loved, but then they're so crazy about that they end up not even being liked, if that makes sense.
They push people away because they want it so badly.
Yes. So I'm trying to think about it. For me, I was like, when I do certain things, I feel like I go into it with a lens that no one would ever uh, like or respect me. I think that's like a weird thing in my head that I have to commonly not. So I feel like I can get embarrassed really easily. This it doesn't show up in like it's like literally in my head. It doesn't show up in how I don't talk like that. I don't think I act like that. But it when sometimes I'm sitting there and I'm like, wait, am I fundamentally unlike like it causes me to question myself unnecessarily and unhelpfully. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And sometimes I wish that noise would be taken out because I think it does compromise my judgment in certain situations.
so it's just kind of this little voice of doubt.
Yes. And
Okay.
you're like, oh, is that, and then especially if you've had that since you were a child, you're like, oh, is that true after all? And it'll haunt you in really weird times. And you just want that to not affect when you're trying to make really important decisions. So I think I was saying, like, when I have to fire someone, it's super hard for me to be like, wait, am I right on this or am I really off? And I think because I have that weird doubt, I'm like, no, it's you. You're the problem. You're not flexible enough. You're not this. When I'm like that really muddies my judgment there, and I wish I had less of that. That's all.
I like that. I can relate to that. And does it
Mm.
happen initially or does it happen later? Because like I found for myself that I can go, weeks with lots of confidence, lots of, good things happening, and then can have this doubt appear like weeks later.
It's exactly like that. Yeah. It's not like I have it initially. It's like in the middle of me like trying to do something and I think everything's fine. It like creeps up on you and you're like, wait a minute. Like it's like the weirdest thing that just like causes you to self-doubt. The older I've gotten, the better I've known that I'm like that. And I'm like, oh, that voice is not real. So whatever it tells you in these, so like if I got that with acting, it's actually really destructive with acting because the moment you're self-conscious, you're going to act terribly. So you have to really not listen to that at all, but it's super hard. That's where I found it's messed me up the most. In business, it's less of that, but with, again, I'll be totally fine. It'll creep up on me. And then I have to know how to kind of like, what do you like, de- deactivate that, whatever, like, what is it?
Delete it. It's like,
Yes, or whatever. Yeah. Diffuse the bomb. Yeah. So that you're sitting there to be like, no, that is not real. And to keep moving forward productively.
nice. I like that answer. So, who has had the most significant impact on your life? and why?
Oh man. So many people have had a significant impact on my life. It's hard to say. But if I were to have to really pick one, this is kind of related to what I just talked to you about. So the person that had the most significant impact on getting me to where I am today is I had an acting coach that was offered to me. I was in a theater company in New York called the Bats at the Flea Theater, and they had like an acting coach there that was really affordable at the time. And she went into the work being very much like, what's going on for you? What are your hurdles, and how can we kind of get you to the next level? So it was a lot of mindset stuff. And when I went to her, I was suffering very acutely from being like, I don't know if I don't know if I'm good enough to be here. I don't know if I'm right to be here. And it was so prominent that it would follow me into like every single situation that I was in. And because I was almost basically acting full time at the time, it was really hard. And so she had to help me go into my own brain. And when I had my voice, figure out, like, work with me. I'm like, it, I'm having such a real feeling, or like, how do I know that that thought is not real? And so she was the one to teach me that your thoughts are not, sorry, your feelings are not reality. Your thoughts and your feelings are not necessarily reality. It's not to say that they're not valid and they're not real. Like, yes, you're feeling those things, but the thing that you think is true behind it. So if I'm feeling anxiety, and the truth you attach to it is like, oh, I'm I'm worthless. That's those two it may not be those two things together, if that makes sense, right? And it was really important for me to learn very technically how to not take things personally, which I think is super important when you're doing things as an adult, because you want to be teachable and you want to be flexible. And it's hard to do that if you're taking things super personally.
Yeah, as
Right.
a founder, especially, and
Yeah.
dealing with rejection and everything. And I can imagine uh, going into acting, all the rejection you get from,
Yes.
you know, trying out, trying to get cast into different things really helps on the entrepreneur side too, because there's
Yeah.
probably a lot of no's that you've received.
Yeah. And you just have to get back on the horse and not be like, oh my God, should I not do this? I've never thought that as a founder, which probably is a testament to how much impact this person had on my life. Her name's also Jennifer. So that I could show up today and, like, an investor doesn't like what I have to say, or that's his loss. Like, keep moving on, right? Obviously, but then also be able to take the notes and be like, what can I take from this? Instead of just being like, no, like, I don't care what they have to say. Like, you don't want that reaction either, where you don't take in anything. So yeah, it puts you in the best position, I think.
All right. Well, shout out to Jennifer for helping you with that. That's really cool.
Thank
So,
you.
is there a book that you recommend the most to people? What is that book?
Oh man. This is bad. You know what? I really don't read books. I know, like, that is the thing that they say that like founders should do. I consume an insane amount of articles. That's where I get like all of my knowledge, and I kind of mishmash everything together. But I actually just I've been starting to read books recently. So I'll just tell you the one that I'm reading right now, which let me see if I can let me get the name of what is the name of it, so I can also shout out this person. I don't ah I don't exactly know how to pronounce her last name, but her name is Maha uh, Abulin. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry if I butcher this, but it's Abouelenein. She's the CEO of Digital and Savvy, and she has a book called Seven Rules of Self-Reliance that just came out. And I saw her speak, and she was so inspiring. I was like, oh my God. I was like, I love her kind of life story. She uh, worked in Minneapolis, grew up in Minneapolis, but then had to move to Egypt and figure out how to like recreate her life there. And started, I think, as somebody's like assistant or executive assistant, something like that. And then at first was like, I don't know if I want to take this. I shouldn't be recounting her story, but basically, she ultimately ended up becoming his partner a business partner. And she learned so much because she had the humility to really like figure things out all the time. Same kind of mindset. And it's just like, I love that sort of flexible mindset. She has so much grit. She has so much grace. And I got her book and I did not finish it, but I highly recommend it because even what I read so far, it's just, to me, for someone like me, it gave me so much hope for like a map of, I'm like, okay, all my trying is not in vain. Like this is, I live like this, she lives like that. Like, and there's so much more progress and growth that any one of us can do. So I would recommend that particular book.
I can't wait to check it out. Sounds very
Yeah.
inspiring. Here's the lightning round of questions, and these are easy. Favorite candy
Okay.
bar?
Twix.
Favorite music artist?
BTS.
Favorite cereal?
Kicks.
Mac or PC?
PC.
Google or Microsoft?
Oh my, Google.
Dogs or cats?
Oh, that's so hard. I have 4 dogs. I have 1 cat, but I am obsessed with my cat, which I never thought I'd say, so cats.
Phantom or Les Mis?
Oh, Les Mis. Absolutely.
You mentioned White Lotus, but is there any other? I wanted to, I guess the first question would be your favorite documentary and then your favorite TV series of all time.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I have a favorite documentary. I'm thinking about that. I'm like, I don't. And the thing is, like, I've watched so many of them that it's like, it's just like a mishmash of like true crime. And then, like, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, I don't know, I have a favorite documentary. My favorite series of all time? See, when you ask me that, then I start to get technical because I'm like, is it Breaking Bad? Is it Breaking Bad? Or, you know, where people are like the 3 of all time, it's either Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, or I forget the third one that people have. I did love Breaking Bad. I thought Breaking Bad was excellent. I don't know if I have a favorite series of all time, but I love one. I'll just say the ones that have been in my heart recently that I love so much. One is Righteous Gemstones, which is currently, it has a new season that's come out. I don't know if you watched it at all.
I started it.
Oh, did you?
It's hilarious.
It's ridiculous. I love it.
Who knew that Danny McBride could write and direct and act and all this stuff? It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's insane. I love it. And then I also really loved Barry. You probably are getting a sense of my personality just from the things I like. White Lotus, I think, is great. Is there any other series? And I have to say, I did a shout for a series from when I was very, very, very young. But I don't know if you remember Quantum Leap.
I've heard of it, but I've never watched
Oh
it.
my God. That really like, that's from like, I don't even know, the 80s, 90s, I think it was. But that was such a nostalgic, beautiful series of this guy who keeps going into different people's bodies at different times, and then he's like destined to do that for the rest of his life, but he has like a certain mission while he's as that person, and it's just like a really beautiful, sad, beautiful kind of series. But that's a really old one.
Is it a different mission with each body that he?
Yes.
Okay.
And then he has to like figure it out.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I think from the 90s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I love those answers. So last question for you, Jennifer. What's the worst thing about being an entrepreneur and what's the best thing?
I think the worst thing about being an entrepreneur is often how lonely it can feel, because you are in uncharted territory and you do represent your venture. And it can feel like you're constantly like, is is this truly a unique experience, or that no one else has ever had, or is it just me, or is it? And I think it's the inability to contextualize your experience, because a lot of things are the very first time you've done it and you don't know. And especially with how fast technology changes, or things can change on a dime, you know, whether it's technology, tariffs, anything, you can commonly feel really vulnerable. I would say that's the hardest thing to deal with. The best thing about being an entrepreneur is just that, you know, the world is kind of your playground when it comes to building your business, if you want to see it that way. I know it might not feel like that all the time, but like, you just have options galore in terms of the problems that you have that you're facing, how to solve it. There's no right answer. And I personally think that's a beautiful thing.
That's so inspiring. And thank you again for being so generous with your time today. I'm sure the audience is going to get so much out of this. I love the fact that you had so much experience and you started entrepreneurship kind of later in life, right?
Yes, I was 38.
Yeah. So all those years of experience before you did that. And I think the message that I'm hearing from you is that it's not too late to start. And I think there's a lot of people that maybe get laid off or they're in corporate jobs they don't like. And entrepreneurship is a pathway to go try that. And my suggestion is for people that want to try it is to follow your lead and try entrepreneurship. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.